Hello, welcome to Executive Dashboards series from DoSQLBI.com. This video series on the executive dashboards is in three parts. In part 1, we would look into PowerView dashboards. In the second part, we would go over performance point dashboards. And in the last one, we would go over SSRS dashboards and business alerts. Under PowerView dashboards, we had already two sessions. In the first session, we went over the business scenario, and in the second session, we had a solution walkthrough of the pre-built dashboard using PowerView. In this current session, we would go over the deployment options that are available for deployment of PowerView reports. Let us take a look at this architecture slide. PowerView report are possible with having Power View and Power Pivot available. Power Pivot can be available either as Power Pivot for Excel 2010 or 2013 or Power Pivot for SharePoint 2010 or 2013 or with SQL Server 2012 it is also available as SQL Server Analysis Services tabular version. So the first thing to make available is Power Pivot in any of these three forms. Depending upon how you make the Power Pivot available, you can then have accordingly the options how and where you could create the Power View reports. If you make Power Pivot available as Power Pivot for Excel, we could create the Power View report within Excel itself. And then with Power View report created as Excel sheets with Excel 2013, those reports can be viewed from within Excel itself. So that is one path where Power Pivot is available as Power Pivot for Excel. The Power View report has been created within the Excel. One can see those Power View reports within Excel itself. If you want to share those reports with anyone else, all you do is you take that Excel workbook and send it across to another person who can then view those reports, provided he has other required prerequisites installed on the system, which is basically Power Pivot for Excel and Power View for Excel. If the Power Pivot has been made available as Power Pivot for SharePoint or as SSRS tabular, then Power View report creation can be done within SharePoint 2010 or 2013. And those could be then rendered as SharePoint reports where you could create Power View reports, which are basically type of SSRS reports. Excel workbook that would contain Power View reports can also be rendered with SharePoint 2013. Excel services in SharePoint 2013 has the ability to render the Power View reports embedded in the Excel workbook. Office 365 SharePoint Online also has ability to render Power View reports embedded in the Excel workbook. In case of Office 365, it is Excel web app that renders that report, compared to SharePoint 2013 where Excel services renders the Power View reports embedded in the Excel workbook. Down below you see the data sources. Power Pivot and Power View can consume a variety of data sources. Below is a list of some of the data sources that are possible to consume. It's Access, Web, text files, OData feeds, XML, SQL Server, Analysis Services, Azure Marketplace, and all that support ODBC and OLEDB providers. We will now take a look at the deployments of these reports, where we will see Excel 2013 we have already seen when we went over the solution walkthrough in our previous video. In this one we will concentrate on item 2, 3 and 4. Let's switch to show you my list view here. What do you see on this screen are these timesheet files. The last one is an Excel workbook. Now this Excel workbook has embedded in that the Power View reports, and it also has the Power Pivot. Now that file is deployed to SharePoint 2013. Now let's try to view this. Now this is the Excel workbook that is rendered by Excel services in SharePoint 2013. The report that you see on the screen was the same that we saw in the second session of this series under solution walkthrough. This by itself is not the PowerView report. This is the using data mining and generating the the forecast report. This is the summary by practice which we saw earlier. The look and feel and functionality is exactly the same as we saw there. Now the only difference is earlier we were seeing it from within the Excel. Now this report is being rendered by Excel services, and we are using the browser to see that report. It has all those reports that we had seen earlier. Was the defaulters timesheet. Would not go in very detail again into that, just kind of quickly have a look at some of them. This was the time off report, where we could see the trends of the time off taken by employees and which country has the same trends as per the government regulations. We had this summary by project, could just select, deselect. So the experience is exactly the same. Now the advantage of having it deployed to SharePoint is that all the security and sharing mechanism and infrastructure of SharePoint takes care of that. Now this was the last report in that billing trend. I could just go and see it, exactly the same experience. I can pop out any particular selection, can scroll, I can pop in back, deselect. And this last report, which is the summary view, this is not the Power View report. This is the Power Pivot report. It was just to show that one other possibility. Before Power View, only Power Pivot reports could have been created, which has its own capabilities and the user experience. That is possible. I could just go and make some changes here. Suppose I want to sort the value from largest to smallest, the graph would then change accordingly. So this last one is the Power Pivot report. If I come back to the deployment metrics slide, what we just saw was Excel workbook that was containing the data model and was built Excel workbook which had the data model and the data, and Power View report was embedded within the Excel workbook, and this Excel workbook was deployed to SharePoint 2013, and we were taking a look at it from there. Let us go back and see now this Office 365 version of this. I have this browser window open. Let me log in. What you see on the screen is Office 365 SharePoint Online, and I have created BI site, and I have these dashboards put in this document library. I have the exact same copy of this Excel workbook deployed to SharePoint Online. Now let's click this and then see what happens. See, Excel web app is the one that is going to render this Excel workbook in SharePoint Online. Now this report is rendered by Excel web app on Office 365 SharePoint Online, the exact same report that you saw during the walkthrough and just a moment back when it was deployed to SharePoint 2013. Exactly the same reports that we just saw earlier. I could just slice and dice it exactly in the same way as we did it when it was deployed to SharePoint 2013. Defaulters list, time off report, can do the slice and dice, just clicking on removing the filters. Let's see this billing trends. I multi-select two of them. I can pop out, see this window, scroll, come back, pop in, deselect, and then this last one, which was a Power Pivot report. Now remember, this what you are seeing right now is on Office 365 SharePoint Online, where Excel web app is rendering the Power View and Power Pivot reports. Let's come back to our slide. So what we just saw is this Excel workbook we had seen during our walkthrough when we simply opened the Excel file, which is option 1, and then we saw this deployed on SharePoint 2013, and then we could see those reports where Excel services on SharePoint 2013 renders this, and then we deployed the same Excel file to SharePoint Online Office 365, and Excel web app is rendering the PowerView and PowerPivot report there. Now what we will see now is when Power Pivot is available as Power Pivot for SharePoint, and then see this path of the deployment option, and then at last we would see the SSRS tabular. Let's come back to browser window. This is SharePoint 2013, and I have this connection file here which is called as BI semantic model connection. Let's see the properties of this connection, where it is pointing as of now. I have a tabular version of analysis services, which is the server name / tabular, the instance of that, and there is a database with the name timesheet. If I have my studio open, yep, this is SSAS tabular, and there is this database as timesheet. Now what you just saw here, this is Power Pivot for SharePoint, that instance of SSAS, and when we ran that report on SharePoint 2013, it in the background created this database on the runtime, that analysis services database on the Power Pivot for SharePoint instance of analysis services. But what we have here is on the tabular instance of analysis services, we have this database. This database has been created by restoring from Excel workbook. So the original Power Pivot model and the data population was done there, and then analysis services tabular version allows you to restore the database there. We'll not go in any more details. We'll cover them under the last session, which is development related details. So coming back to the browser window, what we have here is this connection .bism, BI semantic model. This connection is pointing to server analysis services tabular instance, and the database is a timesheet. So this is just the connection file, and then we have this PowerView report that has been created in SharePoint 2013. This is basically you need to have SSRS SQL Server reporting services deployed in the SharePoint integrated mode, then only you could create this report. So if I come back to the architect slide, this fourth option is what we have, this report. So this is the connection file, just the connection file, and this is the actual report. Let's see where this report is pointing to. We can just go and then see manage data sources. I click on this, and now I can see here this report is using the data source, which is this timesheet.bism. So to whatever place this data source data connection file is referring to, that is what this report is using. So we can come back and we can run this report. So if I run this report, which is timesheet.rdlx file, it is going to make use of this connection file, and this connection file by itself is pointing to tabular instance of analysis services. So basically what we are saying is we are going to see this path. Analysis services tabular version has the database and the data that is going to be consumed by the PowerView report, which would be rendered with SharePoint 2013. Let's take a look at that. So this is now PowerView report, which is a .rdlx file. It is not embedded in the Excel workbook. It is a standalone report deployed on SharePoint 2013. And when we see this report, it is getting the data from analysis services tabular instance. Experience is same. You can just click. I can slice and dice the way we have been doing it in when it was deployed to SharePoint and Excel services was rendering this. And I have some more options here, like I can just switch to full screen mode, which gives me the snap quick list of all the reports in the bottom. I can directly jump to the last one. I can again do the selections, the data would get updated. I can just pop out, do the scrolling, maybe select some value here and then pop in to see my this sheet already getting updated. I can deselect this. This is the report that we are seeing in SharePoint 2013. There is a nice feature when you deploy RDLX report. We could export it to PowerPoint. So when you click on this, it gives you an it asks you for a few details, and then you see that file is exported to. I have already done that. We'll take a quick look at that. Now what you see right now on the screen is when I exported this report to PowerPoint, all the reports became as various PowerPoint presentation sheets. This also has a very nice feature. I can run it as a slideshow. Let's say I say from current slide, asks me for the credentials. This what I'm seeing is basically a PowerView report that was exported to PowerPoint. It allows me a interaction as well. I get this symbol here if I want to interact with the report. Otherwise, without that I can't just do any interaction. I click on the interact. Now from within the PowerPoint, I can have the same experience that I am having by running the report in SharePoint or in Excel. Live report within PowerPoint. I selected a particular manager. I'm seeing the employees that worked with him. I can deselect. I can pop out. I can select a particular employee. I can pop in. Can see accordingly the selections there. That is another feature when you export the PowerView report to PowerPoint that is possible when you view that PowerView RDLX file. Let me come back to the presentation window. What we just saw is SSRS RDLX file that was making use of SQL Server Analysis Services tabular instance. Just remember that when we use SSAS tabular instance, what we need from SharePoint that time is not its Power Pivot capability, because just the report creation is done on SharePoint. The PowerView report is created there, but Power Pivot is provided by Analysis Services tabular instance. Now we want to see Power Pivot for SharePoint, which basically means we could create Power Pivot workbooks, but we want to see how our report can point to that workbook instead of Analysis Services tabular instance. Let's come back to our report. So we are back to SharePoint 2013. This report is using this connection, which is pointing to the Analysis Services tabular instance. We want to change it to point to this workbook. So let's first see the path of this workbook. I'm copying it here. Now I am going and to the connection file. I want to edit the connection information. Now this time, you see, it allows us to use either the workbook URL or the server name. I'm going to remove the server name, paste the workbook URL, remove the extra information that is there, remove this database name also because this is not now needed, and I say OK. Now what is going to happen is when this report is run, the connection file is going to make it point to this Power Pivot workbook instead of the server. Now let me click this. It should be seamless for the report because I have the exact same version of the database that was on Analysis Services tabular version as well as within the Excel workbook. So it's seamless to the report. We could run it seamlessly. We could do all the activities that we could have done earlier. I can make a selection. The values will get filtered. I can pop out. I can choose a different one. I can pop in, and accordingly the values change. So coming back, Let's come back to the architecture slide. What we just saw is now the same report, instead of pointing it to analysis services tabular version, it was pointing to Excel workbook that was rendered with Power Pivot for SharePoint, and then the report was created as an SSRS RDLX file. So to summarize the PowerView deployments, we could do it all with Excel. We could deploy it to SharePoint 2010 and 2013. We have the option to see it in Office 365 SharePoint Online. And we saw what are the data sources, what are the client tools that are available. In this series, we have completed 3 sessions where the first one was the business scenario walkthrough, and then we saw the pre-built solution walkthrough, and in this video we saw the deployment options that are possible for deploying the PowerView reports. In the next session, we would go over implementation details, how to develop PowerView reports. I'm Nasir Ali Mirza at DoSQLBI.com. Thanks.